Welcome to Playing Above the Line, where we interview entrepreneurs, business owners, and community activists to get their thoughts and perspectives on leadership. Playing Above the Line is sponsored by Aviso Group, a business consulting and accounting firm focused on preparing clients for the future through innovation and positive growth. Welcome to Playing Above the Line. I'm Alan, your host, and I'm excited about today's episode because it's a little bit different. We have a father and daughter duo today. So our guests are Vaughan Drinkard and Barber, and they are attorneys at Drinkard and Barber. So guys, thanks for joining us.
It's good to be here, Alan. Thank you for having us.
Well, let me just start with this obvious question. So you guys are father, daughter. Vaughan, how did you decide that you wanted to get into the legal profession? And then Tara, did you just see your dad growing up and decide that's something that you wanted to do? Did it come later in life? And then how did you guys end up together? So that's kind of a long question, but I'm interested to hear what you have to say.
Long story made short for me, Alan. My grandfather was my mentor.
Okay.
And early on, when I was 10, 11 years old, Perry Mason was big back then. I enjoyed Perry Mason and felt like I could solve the mysteries as it was going along. But truthfully, Pop said, if you want to do anything successfully, whether it be practice law or not, you need a law degree, or a law degree is very good to have. So way back then, 50 years ago, literally, he encouraged me to do that.
Okay, that's great. So Granddaddy had a big
He really
influence.
did, yes.
Yeah. So Tara, what about you? I mean, so did you see Dad practice law? Is that something that you've always really wanted to do?
From a young child, figured that probably is something I would do. I have served in every capacity at the law firm, started as a runner and moved my way up to file clerk, and between college and law school did some paralegal type things, and I think I've been in every office in our law firm. And so then went to law school and came out and started practicing with him, and it's been fun. And now I have two 16-year-olds. They've just started running down there for us. So it's a multi-generational thing, and it's been fun to be together.
Well, so talk about the family dynamic. I mean, I've got two children, and I don't know that I can picture really working with them day in, day out. I love them, but that's got to be unique. So, Vaughan, I mean, how was it? Did it take some getting used to an acclimation to get used to having your daughter there?
It really didn't, Alan. It was kind of natural because, like I say, she's always been down there since she could really drive a car. And we are mutually compatible, I would say. Both girls are, frankly. We have two girls. But it has been no problem at all. Sometimes you have a rub there just naturally. That's just not been the case here.
Okay. I think we're a lot alike, and that helps. And we like to process things, and so we can do it together, And so my mom and my sister don't have to listen to it.
True.
So, Tara, I mean, what have you learned from Dad over the years from watching him? I mean, has anything with his leadership style or the way that he runs the firm, has anything in particular kind of stuck out to you over the years as you've watched him?
He is old school and really always has been, but he taught me you return a client's phone call the same day. And so coming up with that kind of, mentor ahead of me, and then seeing that's not always the case, I guess, with the more modern partners, but you always go back to that old school of the gentleman law practice, and even being a female in the industry. I think it's just that concierge type practice for your clients. And so we enjoy working with people, and I think that's one of the primary things that led us into the area that we're in now. And he was in litigation for a lot of years, and I enjoyed that part of it too, the courtroom side of it, but just the one-on-one with our clients these days, is what we enjoy.
And so you guys do a lot of estate and trust work, is that correct? Is that kind of what your primary practice is?
Yes, going back, interestingly enough, when I was a second-year law student, Alan, my grandfather brought me a book that said how to avoid probate court. And even when I had not taken trust law, I did my first revocable trust for my grandfather based on that book. And it was a fairly pathetic trust, frankly, but through amendments, that particular trust existed about 30 years later when he passed on, and it did exactly what he wanted it to do. So that interested me in trust, and even though I was a litigator for my first 30 years or so of practice, I always did trust work for friends and important clients. And so when Tara graduated from law school in 2000, I didn't want to start litigation in earnest, and we were winding down a little bit. So I said, let's start a trust practice. So you've heard of a boutique practice. It really is that these days, and because we really just major on revocable living trust and how they help people.
So what's the ideal client, I guess, or who would need to come see you for your services?
The couple that might need our services, Alan, or even young couples that have an estate that accumulates equity in a house, savings accounts, 401k, that's $250,000 to $300,000, can basically be a trust client. The trust, as I said earlier, will avoid all probate during your lifetime, but it puts your property where you absolutely control it. If you got disabled, you have mechanisms in the trust to control that property during your disability, and certainly if you pass on, then it devolves that property exactly how you have told it to send that property to your heirs. So that is the average client that would need a trust.
I've got to think that with the area that you're practicing in now, you really get a chance to know your clients. I'm sure that you have to, at times, act as not only their attorney, but also their counselor and therapist, or whatever you want to call it. So,
Yes.
so talk about the connection that you make with your clients, and because you really get to know the intimate details of their lives as you're kind of going through and putting a plan in place that they want enacted, right?
As Tara said, we love people, and it is heavily people-oriented, client-oriented. The trust document that we use is about a 100-page document, so it's different than many lawyers do, much shorter documents. But beyond the documents, there's a tremendous amount of education that goes on with this type of trust and the collateral documents we use. And so multiply the standard time you'd sit with a client of maybe 2 or 3 hours, 5 times that. Mm-hmm. And then that necessarily, as you suggest, gets into heavily counseling beyond the legal work. And what about this wayward child, and what do we do for this one down the line? And you step out of the shoes of a lawyer, and you are true a counselor, psychologist, you name it. And so that's true.
Well, and the documents are detailed to the extent that you can get as specific as you want. And so that does lead into a lot of the issues that the clients are dealing with and the questions they have in their lives. And, we enjoyed that part too.
Great. Well, let's talk about leadership specifically just for a minute. I'm interested to get both of your answers to this. So, Tara, when you think back, how has your leadership style and maybe your view of leadership changed over the time that you've been working, and specifically with your dad? I mean, has it evolved at all over the years?
I think I've always had a bend towards leadership, with also the component of being able to be led, but absolutely, and being a mom and the different roles that I've fulfilled over the last 15, 20 years now, it's interesting to see. In this day and age, I think it's very important to value our leaders, to see the characteristics that make a good leader and try to model ourselves after that. And so, yeah, it's been an interesting evolution, I think, over my life to see the different leaders that I look up to and the different qualities they have and trying to emulate those.
So what are a couple of qualities that kind of stick in your mind when you think about those folks?
Sure. I think consistency and a love of people, I think, has been important for the ones that I've seen that have been successful with it, and coming back time and again, because we all have moments of what we might consider failure. Mm-hmm. And I think the ability to pick yourself up and dust yourself off and not try to live up to that expectation of perfection. I see a lot of that in my kids' generation, just a striving for perfection, and that can lead to a lot of issues, anxiety and things like that. So I think just realizing that none of us are perfect, and that we all fail, and that that's okay. And that when we do, it's really a matter of proceeding from there and realizing that's not an end, that can be a beginning, maybe even a segue into something else. I think that's important to give ourselves that grace and to turn it into opportunity.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Vaughan, what about you? I mean, I'll be interested to get your take, because obviously, you're the dad, so you've had more life experience than Tara. So what about you? What would you say to that?
Well, of course, a good leader leads by example. And think about quantity and quality. It's very tough to have a good medium point that you fall on. And some leaders, some heads of office, for example, have a hands-off approach. Some have too much approach to it. So you try to get a happy medium, and that's what I've tried to do in my practice and my business. At one time when I was in litigation, we had a huge office, mm-hmm. and I had people that helped me do that, but the leader has got to get in there and get hands-on. So the quality has got to be there also. You've just got to hit happy medium is what comes to mind.
Yeah, I like that. Well, let's talk about Pop for a minute, your granddad, you mentioned him early on, but he was a mentor of yours, so
Yes.
inspired you to become a lawyer and do what you do today. But what qualities did he have? What emulated with him?
He was a self-made man, very little education, put himself through 3 years of watchmaker school, became one of the fine jewelers in Mobile. Cliff Harris was his name, and retired in the 50s, so way before y'all's time. But had a great reputation, man of his word. His word was a bond type thing. And everything he touched was successful, mainly because he really wanted to do it right. And I think that's the best thing I could say about him.
Yeah, all the great qualities. Well, Tara, what about you? I mean, I know obviously your dad, I'm sure, is a mentor. Can you speak to some of the things you've learned from him, and maybe somebody else, if there's anybody else in your life that you want to?
Sure. I think work ethic and putting other people's needs before your own have been qualities that I've experienced with you, and my mom was very instrumental in that. Having fun while you do it and laughing a lot. And it sounds cliche maybe, but that, enjoying what you do is so important. And that's what I tell my kids now, is just try to figure out what you enjoy doing, because if you're enjoying it, you're not working, and impacting people, I think, is so important. And I've watched you do that and enjoy what you do, and strive to be the best at what you do, and constantly learning.
Well, so speaking of enjoyment, I mean, what's the favorite part of what you do? I'm sure your days are like ours, really. There's really no typical day. You really never know what you're going to meet when you come through the front door. But when you think back over your career, what's the favorite thing that you get to do in your position as an estate attorney?
Mine is working with the people and just helping them. That's an enjoyment I've always had, and just being with them, getting to know them.
Yeah. Vaughn, what about you?
Really the same. It's a very intricate practice, Alan, in that you not only prepare and provide the documents properly, but in this type of document, you have put all the property into the trust. Mm-hmm. And we actually have paralegals that minutely, if I can use that phrase, get all the properties in the trust. They don't rely on the clients trying to do it. We do it. Yeah. So the process is a long process. It's usually about an average of 3 months from the first time we interview the clients until the end. But to answer your question, we leave with very, very satisfied clients. I don't think there's one I can think of in the last several years that we've dealt with that haven't walked away and said, thank you so much for doing what you've done, if I may say, because they leave with their arms kind of around their legal estates. What it amounts to is what we like to say.
Okay. Well, that's great. And obviously, I mean, both your passions are very evident and obvious. But on the flip side, I mean, you guys are entrepreneurs. I mean, you own your own firm. So what are some of the most challenging things that you have to deal with? As business owners, we all have things that aren't necessarily fun or challenges that we face. So what's in your mind, one of the most challenging things about being your own boss, basically? I mean, that's what you are, right?
I can answer that.
Okay, good.
Getting people that want to do the right thing and to work and have good work ethic, it's trite, but it's true. And not only that, but people that want to deal with the de minimis things of the practice, that little intricate things that's very necessary but tedious. Right. And we've got 2 paralegals that are just top flight, and they're frankly answers to prayer, mm-hmm. because they're just not out there. And I'm sure that's in every business, depending on what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and to your point, I think TV has done you guys a disservice to some extent, because they show all the glamour and fun parts of law. It's just like any other profession, but they don't show like anything else. You've got
That's
things
exactly
that are
right.
necessary but aren't necessarily fun.
I think the interesting thing is it's never boring. I was talking to one of my 16-year-olds who's considering, he's very good at counseling, and we were talking about the counseling parts of law, but his comment yesterday to me was, Mom, it just seems like being a lawyer is never boring. And I thought, you're exactly right. It is never boring.
That's true.
Well, let's kind of pivot away from law specifically for a second and talk about some passions that you guys have. Just looking at your bios on your website, Tara, I know that you have a big heart for social justice endeavors. Yes. And that kind of thing. So why is that important, and why do you lean toward that?
I got involved a number of years ago with a man named Dr. Joe Savage, and he had started an organization called Roads of Hope, and asked me to be on the board, and I felt very called to do it, not prepared at that point because I was not educated in that area, and since then have learned the statistics of human trafficking, and it is a harsh reality, and it's something that Roads of Hope primarily deals with internationally, but it's an issue that we have within America as well. And I think just being faced with the things that I learned, it was the type thing where I couldn't not get involved and do something about it and try to educate the people around me and my children. And so we have been involved for a number of years on both the adoption side and bringing kids from countries like Ukraine and Moldova over to the U.S. In fact, Mom and Dad helped host several summers, and we had about 10 orphans that came over. We are involved on that side as well as working in country over there with multiple countries to try to help the foster system and some organizations over there with their current crisis. COVID obviously has dramatically impacted that, and the need is still great. And so we have attempted to modify and continue through it like a lot of the charitable organizations have. But I've seen such a heart that people have, even despite our current circumstances. But people are so giving and have continued to be involved and educate themselves. So that's one of my passions.
Well, and you're right. People do have a passion for that and a concern, but practically, what can someone, if they're listening to this podcast, what can they do to make a difference? It's one thing to be concerned and have a heart, but it's an entirely other thing to put action behind it, right?
Absolutely. We have a website, roadsofhope.org. And they can learn just as much as they want to on that. And we've got different things and different ways to get involved locally. And I would just direct them to the website. We're constantly thinking of new ways to get people involved. We were recently involved with a concert for a Christian artist. And really, if you want to get involved, there's a way that you can. So I would direct them to the website and absolutely call me with any questions. I would love to talk more about it with anybody who was interested.
Okay, great. And we will link that website as well as your firm website in the show notes so folks can go there. If
that would be great.
Vaughan, I'm intrigued by this because I didn't know there was such a thing, but you were a certified master gardener.
Yes.
So what exactly is that? Because I'm intrigued. So
it's a great program locally and has been here for a number of years. It's not really well publicized. Auburn University and other universities have come together to create the Master Gardeners program. It's a national program, but Auburn leads it in Alabama. And the Mobile Master Gardeners is a local branch of that, and under Auburn's auspices teaches about 20 to 25 new Master Gardeners a year, and it takes about 3 months to get your certification. And it's a comprehensive, well-taught program. Out on Schillinger's Road is the place. I was 2016's class, I believe. And you learn, Alan, what you don't know. I came up in a family of camellia lovers, and my dad was kind of the camellia guru of this area. I mean, really top-flight guy. So I came up knowing camellias and knowing plants pretty well, ornamental plants, but you learn a lot.
Yeah. I think you started or helped start a community garden too, is that right?
Well, what happened is I tried to retire from law practice in 15. That didn't work very, very early on. But when I did that, my wife and I said, what can we do to give back to the Lord other than our church work? And so we started a 501c3 corporation where pastors would come in for short periods of respite and restoration in a carriage house we have in the back of the big house on Government Street. So when that happened, long story short, there was a large 400-foot deep lot next to our home that had just been sitting there for years and years. Mm-hmm. I would cut it with a backhoe 3 or 4 times a summer. It was just an ugly lot. So I said, I'll kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I'll have a green space there, and we'll have a meditation garden for the pastors. So I built a large English garden there, and then a Japanese garden ultimately in the back. So it's an ornamental garden, formal garden that lays on a little over an acre of land on our property, and it's called Cornerstone Gardens.
Well, that's amazing. So it's still...
Oh, yeah, it's open to the public on weekends, and it's a little publicized, but it's getting more public day by day.
Well, that's great. I love that. Do you have a website?
We do have a website. It's cornerstonegarden.org.
Okay, yes. We'll link that in the show notes as well.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that.
All right, let's talk about fun. We talked about work. We've talked about your passion projects as far as community mindedness and whatnot. So what do you guys do for fun when you're not doing all those wonderful things? Tara, what about you? What are some hobbies, or what's a hobby?
Well, so I'm chasing two 16-year-olds and a 14-year-old currently.
Okay.
So a lot of
Full-time job,
my fun is their fun, and I have one that's passionate about theater, and then two that have just started driving. So we've got a lot of things shifting in our lives, and work with my husband as well. He practices orthopedics in Mobile, and so we stay quite busy.
Well, Vaughn, what about you? So when you retire again at some point, maybe.
I don't know that that'll happen, Alan, but we have 5 grandchildren, her 3, and my other daughter's here in Mobile, has 2 sons, 15 and I think 11. Mm-hmm. And so we chase grandchildren and enjoy every moment of it.
That's great. Well, guys, this has been great. As we wrap up, I do want to ask one more question. So I love the dynamic with you two. So if I ask you, Tara, what's the best piece of advice that you ever got from your dad?
Wow.
What would it be?
It would definitely have to be spiritual. Just pray about everything and follow God's leading. And that has been a thread throughout our lives, and for his too. And he's quite the prayer warrior, and just knowing that I can come to him with anything and ask him to pray, and he does. Also passed down through the generations of just follow the Lord and he will guide, and everything else falls into place from there.
Wonderful. And Vaughn, so if I ask you, when Tara and the grandbabies look back on your life one day, what's the one thing that you want them to remember, say, about Vaughan Drinkard?
Well, that's easy. Following what she said, just look to the Lord in all things, and he's the one that created us and sustains us and makes us. So look to the Lord.
Great stuff. Can't beat it. Well, guys, thanks so much. This has been a lot of fun. Your passion is palpable. I appreciate that. And if folks want to check you guys out again, we'll link all the links and websites in the show notes, and they can go check you out there.
Thanks so much.
It's been a great pleasure, Alan. Thank you very much.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if you did, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes and Spotify. It definitely helps us in the ratings, and it also makes it easier for other folks to find the podcast. And as always, a big thank you to producer and editor Carrie Wolf. Playing Above the Line is sponsored by Avizo Group. If you want to know more about who we are and what we do, you can visit our website at avizogroup.com. That's AVIZO group.com. You can also check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thanks for listening.